Why did Kiplant Kinkle first shoot his parents and then his classmates? What turned an ordinary student, Scott Pennington, into a criminal whose actions shocked the world? In this video, I will talk about school shooters, their past, and how childhood trauma, bullying, and loneliness could lead to tragedies.
My name is Knox. Stay with us
To learn how the fate of troubled teenagers unfolded behind bars. One of the most infamous school shooters in recent U.S. history, Nikolas Cruz, was born on September 24, 1998. His adoptive parents loved him but ignored his behavior and disregarded psychological advice. There are reports that Cruz's biological mother drank alcohol and used drugs during her pregnancy. He was poisoned in his mother's womb, said the public defender to the jury in court. Because of this, his brain was irreparably damaged, and it wasn't his fault. Former classmates described him as someone with a manic interest in weapons and violence. However, all these red flags were ignored. In 2017, Cruz's adoptive mother died of pneumonia. At 19, Nikolas was left to fend for himself. In the middle of the day, Nikolas returned to his former school and opened fire. As a result of this tragedy, 14 students and 3 staff members were killed, and another 17 were injured. Nikolas managed to flee the scene, but was apprehended in a neighboring town. On November 2, 2022, Nikolas was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Currently, Cruz's life is conducted in isolation. He is kept in a single cell and spends most of his time completely alone. He has only 1 hour a day for exercise, and his interactions with other inmates are severely limited. Could his biological mother's unhealthy behavior have contributed to this tragedy? What do you think? Chad Padilla was an ordinary schoolboy from a small town in Italy. His childhood cannot be described as easy. Constant conflicts with classmates and misunderstandings at home. One teacher recalls how Chad often said, "No one understands me." In 2016, he threw scissors and a computer at 2 of his classmates. On January 22, 2018, Chad, who was only 16 years old, entered the school armed. As a result of the shooting, he injured Michaela Jones, who was 15 at the time. Chad fired 6 bullets at her. Fortunately, the girl survived such severe injuries. What led to such a tragic outcome? There were many factors: mental health issues, prolonged loneliness, and bullying from classmates. Additionally, the girl Padilla shot had rejected his advances. After his arrest, Chad Padilla was sentenced to 40 years in custody, but he would never be able to leave there. The teenager's life in prison was filled with violence and threats from other inmates. Despite security measures, he continued to face harassment and intimidation. The constant stress negatively impacted his mental health, and he suffered from anxiety and depression. Ultimately, on March 21, 2022, Chad Padilla was found dead in his prison cell at Telford Unit. His death is not classified as violent, but is that really the case? If I could go back, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed that day. These words from 15-year-old Charles Andrew Williams were spoken after the tragedy on March 5, 2001. On that day, he opened fire in the hallways of Santana High School, killing 2 teenagers. 13 more people were injured. But what could have led to such a tragedy? In 2000, Charles Williams began attending Santana High School. There, he was considered a loser, often bullied and beaten. At that time, Williams befriended a group of skater outcasts and spent a lot of time with them. However, they soon began to bully him as well, and he had to leave. According to eyewitnesses, Williams mentioned at least twice his desire to replicate Columbine. Columbine refers to the mass shooting at Columbine High School in 1999 in Littleton, Colorado, USA. Dozens of students were injured, and 12 children and 1 teacher were killed. Was this really what the teenager wanted? On March 5, 2001, Williams brought a .22 caliber revolver to school and opened fire. The shooting lasted about 15 minutes until he was subdued by a school security guard. Charles immediately confessed to his guilt and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Today, Charles Williams is in a maximum security prison. He has been denied parole several times. However, due to prison overcrowding, a new date for his potential parole was set for March 5, 2025. Does Charles Williams deserve freedom after serving more than 20 years of his sentence? What are you doing, Scott? the teacher asked fearfully when Scott Pennington pointed a gun at her. But instead of answering, he fired. This happened on January 18, 1993, at a school in Kentucky, USA. Pennington, a 17-year-old high school student, killed his teacher, Deanna McDavid, and the school custodian, Marvin Hicks, while injuring several other students. Scott Pennington spent his entire childhood with his family in Elliott County, Kentucky, USA. In 1992, his family moved to Carter County. Scott didn't want to move, but he had no choice but to follow his parents. Scott's family lived in poverty. They couldn't afford running water, and there was a shortage of electricity. His father was an unemployed miner, and his mother was a housewife. The family lived on his father's disability pension. Pennington excelled academically since elementary school, joining the academic team in 5th grade and winning a regional science fair in eastern Kentucky in 7th grade. He taught himself calculus in his first year of high school. After moving to Carter County, he joined the East Carter High School academic team.
It's possible that this is where Scott's problems began. His peers did not accept him and often mocked him. He also held a grudge against his English teacher, Mrs. McDavid, after she gave him a C on a midterm exam.
Pennington's trial was highly emotional and tense, with the victims' families demanding justice. In the end, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Scott was placed in the Kentucky State Penitentiary in Eddyville. He soon became a target of violence and harassment from fellow inmates. In 2014, he got into a violent altercation with a prison food service contractor, resulting in his placement in solitary confinement. He spent 23 hours a day in a small cell, leading to hallucinations, depression, anxiety, and frequent thoughts of suicide. Do you think a bad grade is worth spending the rest of your life in isolation? On August 27, 2012, 15-year-old Robert Gladden entered Perry Hall High School in Maryland with a shotgun hidden under his clothes. In the school cafeteria, he shot and severely wounded a classmate. After Gladden was taken into custody, police searched the home where he lived with his mother and stepfather. They found 11 firearms, including shotguns, rifles, a 9mm pistol, and 2 antique pistols. They also confiscated marijuana and discovered a spent rifle casing in Robert's bedroom. The teenager's parents were involved in a contentious divorce process that had been ongoing for over 4 years, unable to decide with whom the child would live. Robert was accustomed to firearms and could easily access them from his stepfather, which is exactly what he did after drinking vodka beforehand. In 2013, he was sentenced to 35 years in prison, of which Gladden is required to serve at least 20. Currently, his life behind bars is strictly controlled. He has been deprived of many privileges, but he is undergoing psychological rehabilitation, participating in educational programs, and working to manage his depression and anxiety. Could this have been avoided if there were no firearms in the house? On August 30th, 1982, a beautiful baby was born to the Kinkle family. They named him Kipland. But could his parents have known that he would one day become not only their killer, but also the killer of 2 more people? In the 4th grade, Kipland was diagnosed with dyslexia, a learning disorder. When he entered middle school, he began having trouble with the authorities. In 7th grade, he was accused of making bombs, and in 8th grade, of stealing CDs from a store. In 1997, he and a friend were arrested for throwing rocks at cars on the highway, causing one vehicle to crash into another. Kipland's mother sought help from a psychologist, but he only diagnosed Kipland with major depressive disorder. However, on May 20th, 1998, 15-year-old freshman Kipland Kinkle opened fire at Thurston High School. At that time, relations within the teenager's family were strained. When Kipland was suspended from school for bringing a gun, his father suggested sending him to a military academy. This was the last straw. That same day, the teenager shot both of his parents. The next day, armed with a semi-automatic rifle and 2 pistols, he went to school and opened fire on his classmates, killing 2 and injuring 25 others. Today, Kinkle is serving a 111-year sentence in an Oregon State Correctional Facility. He is not eligible for parole. He is now 42 years old, and his days are spent in almost complete isolation. Who is to blame for this tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments.
16-year-old Luke Woodham grew up in an atmosphere of violence and oppression.
Luke was born on February 5, 1981. As a child, he was charming, a blond, blue-eyed boy with an active imagination who loved to read. Luke grew up chubby and needed thick glasses to see. When he started school, this made him a target of mockery by his classmates. Luke's home life was also far from ideal. His parents often fought, and their yelling scared him. They divorced when he was 8 years old, and Luke's father disappeared from his life forever. His mother was a very controlling woman, micromanaging every step her son took and not allowing him to make his own decisions. Even when he became a teenager, his mother controlled what he ate, drank, wore, how he cut his hair, and who he associated with. Later, Luke claimed that he felt suffocated by his mother. On October 1st, 1997, Luke killed his mother and went to school, where he opened fire on his classmates. 2 were killed and 7 were injured. Just minutes before the shooting, Woodham handed his friend a note that read, "I'm not insane, I'm evil. I killed because people like me are mistreated every day." Woodham received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. In prison, he faced violence from other inmates, leading to his transfer to solitary confinement, where he spent most of his time in psychological isolation. Could his mother's hyper-control have led to what happened, or was there another cause?
Can video games be blamed for a tragedy that took lives? Evan Ramsey's story makes us wonder.
When Evan was just 7 years old, his father went to prison for armed resistance against the police. Evan's mother couldn't cope with being alone and began drinking, while the children were sent to foster care. This was a true tragedy for Evan. He endured abuse, but stayed silent about it for years. At school, he was constantly humiliated. His classmates called him stupid and a retard, and he had to live with this every day. 2 weeks after his father was paroled, Evan did something that shocked everyone. On February 19, 1997, he walked into his school with a shotgun. First, he killed the principal, then one of the students. 2 others were wounded. When Evan was about to take his own life, he couldn't pull the trigger. At that moment, he said, "I don't want to die." The police arrested him on the spot. But what pushed this teenager over the edge? Maybe it was his obsession with the video game Doom, where he used the same weapon, a 12-gauge shotgun. Evan later admitted that the game inspired his terrible actions. Ramsey was convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder. The court sentenced him to 2 99-year prison terms. Evan Ramsey is currently serving his sentence in the Alaska Department of Corrections. He will not be eligible for parole until he turns 80. So could a teenager's obsession with video games lead to a mass killing? Share your thoughts in the comments. Friends, that's all for now. In this video, we looked at the lives of teenagers who picked up guns and turned them on their peers. You saw how they went through depression, school bullying, and the influence of video games. Was this what led them to commit these crimes? It's up to you to decide. Did they receive deserved punishment, or do they deserve our sympathy for their hard lives and lack of understanding from adults? What do you think? Write in the comments and don't forget to like. For those of you who look to the future with optimism and know that success is in your hands, and it's not about blaming others for failures, we have great news. We are looking for talented people who can help us create amazing videos. If you can edit, voice videos in different languages, or write creative scripts, we'd love to work with you. Message our Telegram bot, the link is in the description. Do you know how many years the school shooter who killed an English teacher was sentenced to? Find out in this video. Shocking. What did the school shooter write in a note before entering the school? Find out in this video. It's unbelievable, but a fascination with video games affected Evan Ramsey's mind.
Why did he commit the crime? Find out in this video.